I'm Rob Thomas, editor-in-chief of Club and Resort Business, and welcome to another riveting episode of the Club and Resort Talks podcast. Today's guests are Soren and Matthew Spiers, the founding and senior partners of Visions Alliance. They discuss their fractional CFO services for clubs. They help clubs manage financial systems, recruit and train controllers, and provide interim financial oversight. They also give a lot of insight into what maybe some hidden areas that club managers should be keeping an eye on. So stick around for that. But before we begin, I want to tell you that today's podcast is sponsored by the H. Chambers Company. For 125 years, the underlying philosophy of the H. Chambers Company has always been to be able to provide the best. Since 1899, Chambers has evolved from its humble beginnings in interior design to become an award-winning planning, architecture, and interior design firm specializing in private clubs, hospitality design, and related markets. Learn more at chambersusa.com. Thank you, Chambers, for taking out. Before we get to Soren and Matthew Spiers, I want to touch on a little bit of news that's going on right now. Let's start out in Oregon. Baker City, Oregon is upgrading its Quail Ridge Golf Course with a $1.3 million irrigation system to conserve water and support tourism. Despite adding 450 sprinkler heads, the new system at Quail Ridge significantly improves efficiency by allowing individual control of each of the 650 total heads. More is less, right? So you put in more, but each one has control. Prior to the new system, which was outdated, the old system was outdated. It had been around since, I believe, the beginning of the golf course. So it was time. And it wasn't necessarily broken, but it was just flooding certain areas. They weren't able to be very precise with it, and superintendents don't know exactly what that is. You're just putting a lot of water on. Some areas don't need as much water as other areas. So now they can control that. So very, very good. Terrific investment for the future. Next up, let's talk about stay out kind of west in Utah, right? Troon will provide developmental services at Three Bridges, a new luxury residential community in Salem, Utah, residential and resort. In addition, when the community amenities begin to open in 2026, Troon Privé, the private club operating division of Troon, will manage club operations, agronomy, food and beverage, and membership sales and marketing. Three Bridges is going to be spectacular. I have never been to Utah minus a stop in the airport on a connecting flight, but it's spectacular. The landscape out there is unreal. It's going to have an 18-hole Robert Trent Jones to the design golf course and an all-season pickleball and indoor golf facility, hiking and biking trails. I want to say there's going to be some kind of a surf lake there and a twin fin beach club. So a lot happening in Utah. Last but not least, let's head over to New York. Erie County, New York plans to convert the former Westwood Country Club into Willowdale Park, featuring a restored 9-hole golf course, trails, and inclusive amenities, with funding secured and public opening set for 2026. So this golf course has been closed for many, many years and has just been sitting there dormant. So this is going to breathe new life into it. A park with hiking, biking, a lot of trails going on there, 9-hole restored golf course. So that's going to be a nice addition to Erie County. I think Erie County is in is that the Buffalo area? Amherst, I think, is where this is going to be. So looking forward. That's not too far from me. So maybe I can make the drive and check it out when it opens in 2026. All right, so we got the news out of the way. We told you about our sponsor, Chambers. Let's get to Soren and Matthew Spiers to hear about the CFO side of the club industry. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I'm joined by Soren Spiers, founding partner, and Matthew Spiers, senior partner of Visions Alliance. Soren and Matthew, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for
Thank
having
you
us.
for having us.
Thank you very much for coming. If you could, please, before we get started, give us a 10,000-foot view. What is Visions Alliance? What are y'all doing in the industry?
Uh, Really quick, we're basically what they call a fractional CFO company. We help out clubs in the area of managing their financial system, financials, accounting, especially for, I would call, smaller clubs that don't really necessarily have the resources to hire a full CFO. So we come in, oversee the controller. Sometimes we come in an interim role when GMs lose their controllers, they move on to a better job, bigger job. Then we kind of come in, fill an interim role, and then we help them maybe recruit another controller. It's a really tough market, especially down here in Southwest Florida, where we're at, or South Florida. It's a very tough market now, trying to find someone who's competent. So that's where we come in. We help them out, recruit somebody, then we train them, mentor them, and then we kind of oversee them as a fractional CFO. They're not having to jump in and spend a gazillion dollars on a full-fledged CFO, but we come in on a contract basis and help them bridge that gap between, I would call, a junior controller and the finance committee and treasurer. That's kind of, we help them out on obviously on an interim basis, getting their reports and getting their month closed and getting through their audits if they don't have a controller in place because they left. And then until we find them, then obviously that person takes over just the day-to-day stuff. But we will handle the day-to-day stuff in that interim period. And that's kind of what we do for clubs. And unless Matt, if you got anything to add to it.
Yeah. Just as my dad had mentioned, we basically focus on trying to be that good intermediary between the staff on site and the board members. Oftentimes, board members want to see the big picture of where the club's going long term. And a lot of the accounting people right now, they essentially are really good at recording the past. We help them guide towards the future, and without having to do that huge, big ticket budget of bringing on a full-time CFO, like my dad had mentioned.
And you're not just a couple number crunchers, right? You guys got some experience in the industry yourselves.
Absolutely. I've been in this industry for about 30 years. First, I spent 17 years with the PGA of America, heading up their golf properties financial division, overseeing, I had a large project in Port St. Lucie called the PGA Golf Club, or at PGA Village, and also in charge of the finances for Valhalla Golf Club, which I'm sure some of you have heard of. Hosted the Ryder Cup in 2008 and a bunch of PGA championships. Phenomenal facility. And then we also had some licensing agreements out on Cat Island. We had a huge project going on right before the crash outside of Las Vegas, which unfortunately suffered from the downturn of real estate. But so I did that for about 17 years, and I moved on to Shadowwood Country Club in Bonita Springs. $35 million a year in business, 1,300 memberships, 3 golf courses, 2 clubhouses, large club. And then when I was ready to retire, I had enough of the club industry. No, I'm just kidding. But I needed to retire, and then I'm like, I have so much information. I really want to share that with GMs, treasurers, and basically throughout the industry. I felt like I didn't want to just leave and then just go play golf all day. I wanted to actually help the industry. That's what I.
One thing I've really learned in my time in the industry is it is about sharing knowledge. Clubs are more than happy to help out the club down the street. A superintendent, I got this spot on my greens I can't get rid of. Guy down the street comes in and helps them out, right? So it's not so proprietary. People do help each other very much.
Right. Absolutely.
Very
So
true.
what are some of the most common financial blind spots you guys see in the private clubs, and how can a fractional CFO help uncover and address those?
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I'd say probably the biggest aspects that we find that GMs and club leaders are really missing at times is that oftentimes the financials and the directors of finance, the controllers, whoever it might be, get sort of set in their ways, and so they don't always implement the best practices of what they have in place. And we've just found that it's over time. It's because people have a really long tenure at a club, so they know what to expect. They know what questions everybody's going to ask. So they just cater things to make things a little bit easier for themselves, and so they don't always follow those best practices. So I would say for us, what we often find is actually one of the bigger challenges, definitely internal controls. I'd say, as my dad often mentions, if you order 50 pounds of, lobster tails on ice, how do you know you're not paying for half of it in just the weight of the ice? And who's counting all the lemons when you guys order lemons for the food and beverage operation? So plenty of those kinds of internal controls that we find in place, as well as just a little bit of experience of knowing whenever anything shifts on the financial statements. So if they find anything where all of a sudden cost of goods goes up to 50% one month, okay, well, let's wait until the next month to make sure it's actually a real trend, or is this something that's just a misplaced invoice or something like that? I would say those would be the two biggest ones. I don't know if my dad has maybe a couple extra as well that you could think of.
A funny story. There was a food and beverage controller out of Boca West, a huge club on the East Coast, and she shared with us a story that one day, and I think this is something that GMs some of them know it, but I think it's something that they might want to keep an eye on. Give you a perfect example, and it's to Matt's point about receiving food and beverage. Food and beverage is one of the toughest challenges for GMs, a tough business to crack. But give you an example, it was a funny story. She said that she grabbed her entire accounting team and took them to the meat purveyor. She didn't say who it was, but they went and see the meat plant and how they cut the steaks and everything. And then it was a great trip. They came home, and then she sat down with everybody and says, "Did you guys enjoy it? Tell us what you thought." And they told her, and then she goes, "Did you notice the manager's office?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah, it was very nice." Says, "Well, did you notice that up on the wall there was a giant board?" "Yeah, I did see that." "Well, did you notice there was 3 columns on that board? All the clubs were listed. First column said never weighs. The one in the middle says sometimes weighs. And the one on the right said never weighs." And she said, "Why do you think they do that?" And they're all like, "Well, we don't know." "Well, now you know that the never weighs don't always get the poundage that they order because they never weigh when it arrives. And that's one of those little things that a lot of GMs might not think about. But if you have a good chef, he will receive his goods, he will count his goods, and he'll sign for what he got. And a bad chef or a bad back of the house operator, like Matthew said about the lemons, if you order 100 lemons, who's going to sit there and count the box? Is there really 100, or did the driver take about 30 of them and put them in another box so he can sell it to the next guy? So that's just that story.
I could be a little naive, I think. I would just assume everything's coming the way I ordered it. So good on you. That's quite an experience for those members or those clubs. Speaking of experiences, how can Visions Alliance assist a club in balancing member experience investments with long-term financial stability?
I'd say for us, what I've found is our skill set is being able to cut costs and make things as humanly or as incredibly efficient as humanly possible without actually affecting any of the member experience. What we found is probably the biggest investment overall is finding the right ways to invest in the systems and the processes on the back end to make sure the employees are absolutely operating at their best, which then obviously leads to an overall better membership experience. So for us, really not just coming in, cutting costs, making sure you're, reusing all the light bulbs and rolls of toilet paper. It isn't always the best operation to make sure the members are actually enjoying the club to their best abilities. But putting in those best practices, those internal controls, those systems, make sure everything's absolutely streamlined on the back end is the best way, at least that we've seen for the membership experience. Make sure that you're not cutting deep down to the bone, so to speak, in terms of keeping things efficient.
I think one of the biggest points that I've learned in my career, to be honest with you, Rob, is that we need to understand on the financial side that we are here to work for the department heads and obviously primarily the general manager. It's not the opposite. Some controllers, some accountants, some auditors kind of misunderstand it's the other way around, where you better do what I tell you at that golf shop. You better make sure this works. You better do that. You better this. No, we're here to serve you. They're our customers, which means that we need to provide our, not us particular, but obviously from our service, but our profession needs to provide each department head the best tools that they can do to do their job the best so that they can successfully report up to their boss, the GM, and up to, ultimately the board of directors, that they're successful in their area of responsibility. I did a thing that at my past club, which was kind of cool. I thought it was a good idea. We actually had we sent out a survey to the department heads about how our operation and how our department is helping them. And then I sat down with my staff and reviewed the survey with them. It was anonymous, so we didn't know who was saying what. But there was a lot of opening eyes about how we were perceived by the operators. Ultimately, if we make them successful, if we make them function more efficiently, like Matthew said, then the overall member experience exceed anybody's expectations. And I think that's critical for our profession, to create the tools to help the GMs be successful.
A rising tide lifts all ships. I like that.
Correct.
Now, down in South Florida, season's kind of coming to an end. Arizona coming to an up here in Northeast Ohio, New England, the upper Midwest. It's just starting. Can you walk us through how clubs build a more accurate, and how you help clubs build a more accurate and dynamic budget for like the seasonal fluctuations?
Sure.
Yes. Yeah. For us, what we typically do for our budget process is what's called the zero-based bottoms-up budget. So what we do is we first go to every single one of the department heads, because they're going to be the experts in their area. So whether it's food and beverage, front of house, back of house, membership, anybody, they're going to know first off what's going to be coming up for the next year that might be an unexpected that doesn't show from last year's numbers. But then we work with them through every single line item account, every single month, and just make sure that we actually build something all the way from the bottom to exactly what we think the club is going to have. And then from there, we compare it to last year's actuals. And the last year's actuals is actually the part that's going to really tell you how the season is going to fluctuate. So for us, as Rob had mentioned, of course, here in Florida, the winter months, those are the ones that are the absolute busiest. So you're not going to want to budget, your H2Bs during July. So you're going to be able to take a look at last year's numbers and see where those numbers really lie. And so for us, really just building that from the ground up and then comparing it to last year's numbers is going to give you exactly the right kind of weighting and the seasonality that you're going to need.
So speaking of last year's numbers, KPIs, right? Key performance indicators for the uninformed, such as myself here. What financial KPIs should every private club GM track regularly, and how can your team help implement those metrics?
I think to hold, one of the biggest things, especially during busy times, is when some systems and some financial people and some controllers are not able to provide the GMs with daily labor. I give you a perfect example. If you're in a big club, you're having 350 employees running around all day long. The department heads and the business leaders need the tools. So let's say, for sake of argument, your budget is $500 a day. You need a report on your desk every day. Not you have to go look for it. It should be on your desk every day that says to you, your labor yesterday was, let's say, $400. Okay, now you're saying, oh, I'm on track. This is great. Next day you come in, it was $700. You go, oh, hold it. What happened? You have time to fix it. Because what happens in these clubs, when they get super busy, nobody has time to change anything. And then by the time the numbers are on the table from the finance department in whole, it doesn't show up until the middle of the following month. Well, how can you adjust your labor? That was 6 weeks. It was running off track. So for us, we give the tools and provide the tools to the operators. And it could be obviously hourly. How much is your daily labor? I think it's super important. Daily variable labor is super important for food and beverage. It's super important, obviously, for golf operations. It's super important for golf course maintenance, that they know what their daily labor is compared to what is their daily labor budget. I think that's absolutely critical on a daily basis to make you successful when you're busy. Same thing in food and beverage. You want to know what's your cover count, what's your average cover, what's your what's your average cover for food, what's your average cover for liquor, what's your average cover for beer. At budget to actual comparison on a cumulative daily basis, but also a cumulative for the month, so you know where you're going. There's nothing that impresses a GM anymore than when his department heads come in and tell him exactly where he's at. And he should know, and we provide reports for him, but it gives him an incredible amount of comfort to know that his food and beverage front of the house guy knows exactly where he's at. I'm about $80,000 over budget on banquets. My labor is this much over, this much under, and it gives them the ability to change on the fly. So from a daily standpoint and a weekly standpoint, I think those are critical KPIs. Now we can come up with all kinds of percentages and whatever, but I think that's really when you're in the heat of the battle. That I think is super important. And Matthew might have some thoughts on some monthly KPIs, but for me, that was very important through my entire career, that they knew how they were doing, what they were doing every single day versus waiting for 6 weeks after you close the month.
Yeah, I would honestly, I just agree 100%. The reporting and the dashboards, anything you can do to provide that kind of support for the department heads is going to be the best way to go. As much as you can give them real data as possible, despite the fact that some of the software out there for accounting and finance can be a little dated at times. Giving them as much of the data as you possibly can is going to be the best way to go. But my dad already covered the specific KPIs for sure.
So the numbers can help the struggle with rising labor costs, cost saving opportunities, balance those out.
Yes. And the key is you got to act quickly. If you're in the middle of the season, things are cranking, you got to be able to adjust fast because your numbers are much higher when you're busy. You have a lot more employees. I'll give you an example. If you don't track your labor, you don't necessarily know that people are clocking in a half hour early, clocking out a half hour late. Now, they just added themselves an hour and then it might fly into overtime. So you're not watching it. You can't because you're just worrying about Mrs. Smith's, her hamburger isn't cooked all the way, or we got a member guest tomorrow and we got to get 400 people or 700 people food and entertainment. I mean, you don't have time to make those adjustments. So if you know it kind of not instantly, but on a daily basis, you get a feel for where you're going. And very soon, you don't necessarily look at it every day, but you look at it at least once every couple of days to kind of know where you're at. And then the big KPIs is, you do some benchmarking. There's club benchmarkings out there. It's a great resource. There's some other reportings out there, the Beekman reports. And just when you kind of get closer to the budgeting process and year end, RSM has some phenomenal report. The auditing firm RSM, that you do trends reports, all that stuff. It just kind of, because you at some point are going to sit in front of the board of directors and the finance committee and justify what you do. How does your dues compare to everybody else's? So there's a lot of benchmarking out there, and it just kind of, you got to remember you're your club. Doesn't necessarily mean you compare yourself to everybody else. You do it, within reason. But I give you a perfect example on people like the KPI. How much does it cost per hole to maintain a golf course? Well, do you have the same grass on the greens? No. Okay. If you compare to somebody else, right? You said, well, how many acres are we comparing to? What kind of grass is it? Are you paying for water? I'm not paying for water. So over time, you got to be very careful and compare yourself to everybody else because it's not always apples and apples. It's usually sometimes it's apple and oranges. So you're getting the wrong information. So KPIs are good. I think KPIs are good, but I think in a private club industry, your number one objective is make sure the members are happy. The member experience is outstanding, high quality. And then, you make sure that your costs are in line, but you got to make sure too, you can't compare to everybody else. Once you start comparing to everybody else, you start losing your own identity. So.
Hey, amen to that. How does Visions Alliance ensure financial transparency and alignment between the management and, say, the board or the finance committee?
I'd say for us, the best way, or the way that we offer the best transparency, is having the experience that my father and I have. So sitting there, and like I said, if you go month to month and you see something like cost of goods just fluctuates rapidly, but over the year you see that things look pretty normal. Having that transparency of telling the board, hey, it looks like it's just nobody's walking out the door with a case of wine. It just looks like it was a mistiming of some kind. Having that level of experience is something that it not only gives the transparency to the board, but it also makes them feel that transparency, which is very key. They want to know that when they get those financials, that they're absolutely as accurate as they can possibly be. And not only with the actual financial reports that we offer for each of our clients, but knowing the best practices for those financial statements, giving those from one club to another, not the data, but the actual processes, is basically the best way to get the transparency to the board.
So financial risk and regulatory responsibilities, big, right? How does there's increased scrutiny on both of those? How does Visions Alliance support the clubs in those areas?
Go ahead, Matthew.
Go ahead, Dan. You can do.
Okay, I'm sorry. Could you ask the question again? I'm sorry because my phone I've got turned on.
Oh no, that's okay. We're talking about managing financial risk and regulatory responsibilities, and how the increased club governance and compliance is really, hot points. How do you help clubs with both the financial risk, managing the financial risk, and the regulatory responsibilities?
The thing on the regulatory is we recommend that every single club is audited every year by one of the top 4 or 5 auditing firms. Some people don't want to pay the expense. We think it's absolutely critical you do that. So as far as financial reporting and financial regulatory obligations is a huge part of that. The auditors will make sure that you are in line with taxation laws, tax rules. Are you paying your sales tax? Are you paying your income tax? And that you follow the guidelines within tax exempt organizations? Do you stay below the thresholds of outside events? That's your number one. As far as I think on the human resource side, there's a huge exposure for clubs that try to shortcut, I would say, human resource regulatory obligations or regulatory agencies. And it's a very, very, I would say, as a GM and as an owner of a club, meaning the board and the membership, it's something I'd be very concerned about if you don't have proper human resource policies and procedures in place. It seems like everything's fine until something goes wrong. Want to make sure you have the right things in place, and you have either you sub it out to a full-fledged HR company that watches over and make sure you follow all the, the immigration, I-9 rules, all the workers' comp rules, and that's another area. Workers' comp is very big exposure for clubs because of the maintenance department. There's a lot of risks, and it's just staying on top of it. Staying up to date with it. I think the big ones are human resources, taxes, regulatory, as far as financial statements, and we come to them with best practice. We come to them with, because of our experience, mine being with a big organization like the PGA of America, as well as a large club, trust me, they don't cut any costs when it comes to HR or any kind of regulatory or financial reportings. They, as you know, because of the size of the companies. So I feel like we can lend that expertise and that experience back to the clubs. It doesn't work for all the super, I would call the supercharged HR and also financial reporting for smaller clubs. But I think we bring them the expertise and tell them what they need to do and how they need to solve that risk. So I think we bring a lot to the table with our experience.
So, and with that, to just piggyback off of that, what we found is the best philosophy to help with the compliance and the risk management is to really transition that risk and any of the liability over to providers and vendors. So something like obviously the auditors for the financial side. Insurance companies for the any sort of liability aspect, and then like my dad had mentioned, HR being the one that changes almost daily at this point. It's impossible to keep track of. Offloading that onto some sort of an outsourced solution, whether I know some of the payroll companies have those managed HR solutions, all that, doing as much of that as possible is going to keep any club and any management structure as lean as possible without having to bring on a full-time person, but still addressing what they need. So just having that expertise and that experience of doing that with our clients is really what we bring to the table in that regard.
Rob, I can kind of piggyback off this real quick if you don't allow me. Like I mentioned, the club I was with before, very large club, 35 million, 330 employees at peak of season. And because of the systems that I put in place and we're now providing for our clients, is I ran that entire club with a human resource / assistant controller, an AP/AR clerk, and myself. For over 10 years, we didn't lose one penny. We never had one single lawsuit. And it's just, if you follow these principles that we try to, that we know is out there, that you try to implement and listen to what you need to do, then it doesn't mean it's not always necessarily add-on of costs. It's improving the efficiency. That's what we're trying to improve.
Efficiency is great. We all love it. But we're talking about the day-to-day stuff. But looking at a bigger picture, since COVID loosened its grip on the world, really, capital improvements, expansions, it's going big, 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 which is great news for us in the industry. How do you advise clubs through their strategies to add on to the club, improve the club without risking liquidity or increasing dues too sharply?
That's a Go ahead, man.
I'd say the flexibility of the financing options right now is the biggest focus. So having a really good relationship with the bank, what we use right here in Southwest Florida, we work with FineMark very, very closely. Just having that good relationship with the bank and having that liquidity there in the bank, usually as your somewhat collateral to get something pulled together, getting everybody sold on the vision, allows you to really finance something and really get something structured without having to give up all the cash right out of the gate and lose all of that liquidity. Keep your cash reserves. We had one deal where we were doing a $20 million capital project, and we had such a great relationship with FineMark that they were able to give basically a $10 million, what effectively was a line of credit just off of a couple of signatures. So to be able to finance something like that without just putting all of the capital right out of the gate is something that we found some huge success with. I'm sure Dad's got some insights as well.
Yeah, one thing that I thought was really unique that we came up with was, and this is something that we tried to express to some of the other clients that we have. Give you an example. When normally, traditionally in clubs, you only have two ways really of getting fund a project. You can either go out and, like Matt mentioned, go to the bank, and the bank will give you, in the past, it was 5 years to maybe 7 to 10 year terms, fully amortized. That's what it's going to be. Or you go to the members and say, hey, listen, you need to come up with a check for $25,000 because we're going to redo the clubhouse. But what we found, which we thought was actually brilliant, I didn't come up with the idea, our treasurer did, but I thought it was a brilliant idea, is we went to FineMark, great bank, we went to them and said, listen, we want to fund this project, but we want kind of go into what we call pay as you go. Because what happens in these older clubs is you have a large portion of the membership is aging. And they don't want to write a check for $20,000 or $5,000, whatever it is, to add something that they really might not get any use out of. Give you an example there. If you're in your late 70s, early 80s, do you really want to invest in brand new greens? You're kind of, well, I can kind of live with what I've got. I might only have a couple more years left in the club, so why am I paying for it? So all the people that are joining behind me, they don't have to pay anything. They just come in and play dues. So we came up with this idea, say, well, how do we set up a structure so that, and what we did, we needed, I think it was about $12 million. We went to the bank and we said, we want basically interest only loan. We only want to pay for the interest. We don't want to pay for the principal. And then we'll pay it off when we sell a membership or we generate capital down the road from incoming members through joining fees. And then we will pay the debt down that way. Now, the bank says we can't do that, but we can give you a 25-year amortization, which I'd never heard of in the banking industry for clubs. And all they do is, they pledged a payment from the members, and it was $100 a month per member in perpetuity. And that paid for, I think it was like a $10 million renovation. And the members, they went out to vote, and they had a 97% approval rate because now we were able to get all these aging members on board on the project because they were only paying $100 a month. And they were like, for $100 a month, I can get a brand new restaurant. I can redo all my greens on one of my golf courses, and I can redo our tennis courts. Yeah, I'll do that all day long. Now I can actually enjoy it. It's kind of like, I look at it by I think basically lease our phones, our iPhones. Even though they say we pay for them, we really don't. We actually, we're really leasing them because they just kind of, after 2 years, you got to get another one. Well, they've never paid off. So it's kind of like, same thing with cars. So I think basically pay as you go for these projects have been super successful for us.
I love it. That sounds fantastic to me, being on the, I don't want to say younger side because I'm certainly not that young guy, but that 80-year-old member is not going to be balking so much at it. Neither one of you guys looks like a Swami. Neither one of you has a crystal ball in front of you, but I'm going to ask you to take out your figurative crystal ball, and we'll get you out on this one. We're talking 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. what are we looking at in the club industry? What should general managers and board presidents be thinking about?
I'd say the name of the game right now is amenities and amenities focused on wellness and lifestyle. Almost every single one of our clients, we just signed on about two this last week. And as we were doing tours of the facilities, they had both mentioned how they were doing a giant lifestyle project, whether it was expanding the gym, turning their tennis courts into pickleball courts, adding bocce courts, doing a renovation on the pool, anything like that. When I had left Shadowwood, we had that about $20 million fitness and lifestyle center that had a restaurant, but it's going to have an indoor pickleball court. They were going to add a spa at one point. I think that had changed some direction, but everything seems focused on, as my dad had alluded to earlier, the younger membership that's coming into clubs at the moment. So right now they're going to make the absolute most use of the club as possible. So having as many dining facilities, any amenities you can think of, and quite frankly, any amenities you can think of that are out of the box. Because a lot of the other clubs right now, they're doing, like I said, they're expanding the gyms, they're adding pickleball. A lot of them are very similar. And of course, everybody wants to kind of have those amenities because of the other clubs around them. But if you can think of anything that's out of the box, anything that's new, unique, and focuses on those lifestyle members, those ones that are going to get the most use out of fitness and being active and being outside all the time, that's going to be the name of the game, I would say, for the next 5 years.
Fantastic. I love it. The future looks bright for the club industry. Matthew and Soren, I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. No, great.
Thank you so much, Rob.
Thank you so much, Rob. I really appreciate it.